Welcome to the phone banking workshop. We're going to talk about how to use phone banking to win this cola and everything else. We just did introductions off camera. I made this graphic. This is what the UC system is vast. Like, it spans 10 campuses, and in order to get each of these campuses active, like, one of the only remaining tools in the organizer's toolbox is the telephone. Is email, phone, texting, Zoom, and just regular calls. So many things like sit-ins and rallies have been taken from us by this crazy set of circumstances. So I think phone banking is especially important under shelter in place. So we did a poll earlier, and this graph isn't accurate, but Jane has done some phone banking for COLA and ULP stuff, and Melanie and I have both done other phone banking, mostly for electoral issues or to get out organizers. And we'll talk more about the different types of phone banking. One thing that I've definitely noticed in both for canvassing and for phone banking is that every single person who I've ever convinced to come out thought they would hate it, and in the end found it either tolerable or super rewarding. I'm a pretty extroverted person, and even I have no interest in cold calling strangers to ask them to do something. But people are very generally friendly because they very quickly realize that you're not a telemarketer and that you're an unpaid volunteer trying to make the world a better place. And yeah, in general, it can be a really effective means to organizing. The most important thing about get an effective conversation with a supporter, whether it's on the phone or in person, is to engage in personal storytelling, to tell your story, and to use that to convince the person you're talking to tell theirs. I like to say that no human being in history has ever made a decision based on facts. We use facts to justify and inform our feelings, but if you can make somebody feel heard by hearing them, you're much more likely to be able to get them involved in any given movement. Marshall Gans, who's a mentor of Melanie, who's also on the call, has this activism system using 3 stories to engage activists and community members into getting organized. And there's going to be some links at the end of the presentation about this, but talking about why, how you yourself were called into this leadership moment, into this moment of organizing, talking about why now is an important time to be organized and to be strategic for these actions, and talking about why, what you have in common with the person you're speaking with, what shared experiences you have that make this an important community to build. Your biggest goal is to use interest and compassion to engage the caller. If you can get the caller to answer a major question, like how do you want the world to change, or how have their grievances with their employer affected their life, if you can get the conversation to a place where that question makes sense, they're very, very likely to answer it. And that brings us to this slide, which is that your goal as an organizer, and this is a very hard goal to achieve, especially on the phone, is to talk 30% of the time or less. Your goal is to build a space where the person you're speaking to is really inclined to share information about themselves, and then you can tailor, your movement. If the thing you're working on is just, then it will apply to their life situation. Everyone stands to benefit from the sorts of things that progressive phone bankers, either for cost of living adjustments or for an end to endless war. Everyone stands to benefit from from getting rid of these things. I've been talking a lot about how it's about engagement, and it's about yeah, having said all that stuff about compassion and just genuine interest with the other person, the uh, there's like a caveat to that, which is that the first thing you say has to be a little bit sneaky. Because you want to very quickly make somebody aware that you're an unpaid volunteer, that you're working with them, and even if they don't have time and they end the call quickly after you say the first thing, you want to make sure they walk away from that call with key information from that, which is really hard. So you have to kind of craft this kind of tweet-like sentence that includes so much, but also includes a very like juicy and tempting question. For example, like this is a hook I found online for an electoral campaign. I'm not going to take much of your time. I just have a quick question about the upcoming election. When you vote on Thursday, in the case of whenever the voting deadline is for the union, will you be supporting the unfair labor practices pledge? They might not know they're in a union. They might not know there's an upcoming election. They certainly are unlikely to know what the deadline is. And whether or not they know about the existence of the pledge is like a pretty open question. But by asking the question this way, even if they say now is not a good time and hang up, you've planted a seed where they know that there's an election coming up and they can Google on their own. Like when you vote is like a clever trap because in primary elections, for example, like something like 25% of people vote. So in electoral campaigns, we're often calling people and being like, hey, when you vote this Tuesday, knowing full well that they had no intention of voting. But by saying when you vote, it puts them in a position where they start visualizing themselves as a voter. And that's a huge first step into actually getting them to the polls. And my understanding is that the ULP drive we're currently doing for the unfair labor practices strike pledge is similar. Like a lot of votership without a pledge drive will be very low. But by using phrases like when we vote, you might encourage votership to increase. Does anybody have an idea of a hook that they might want to use for these actions?
I don't have an idea necessarily, but I'm wondering, Rob, if you might have some thoughts about how, or maybe you're going to get to this later, but how to do this specifically for texting. Like, would you also want a hook for your text? We've been sort of playing with a script that looks like, hey, whatever your name is, this is Jane from COLA. Have you heard about the statewide push for unfair labor practice strike? Will you sign the strike pledge today or something? But it doesn't quite snag in the same way as what you're suggesting here.
That's a good point. I've done very little text banking. For my personality, for whatever reason, text banking gives me more anxiety than phone banking, because when I'm on the phone with somebody, you can tell that they're not upset. When I text somebody, I'm always just like, oh, they're mad. They're not responding because they're mad. But I think that it's a similar concept. I think the advantage of text banking is that you can use things like links, and people can learn more on their own time. And something that we did with the DSA is when people didn't pick up, we texted them a similar thing. And that way, if we called them again, they're more likely to pick up because they maybe saved the number, or they know that somebody's calling them about this issue.
I was just going to say, I think unfortunately our union vote just finished. So it finished yesterday. So it doesn't make sense right now, unfortunately, to couple the ULP, the unfair labor practice pledge, to voting. But I do think that we could think about hooks to make the ULP. So my sense is that there are two main things that we're phone banking around. Some people are phone banking for departmental organizing in general, just to build relationships and help people move towards strike readiness. And that's like deeper and relational and might have lots of goals. And then the ULP strike is very strategic, of like getting people to sign a pledge to agree to go on strike if our union calls an official unfair labor practice strike. So I'm wondering if we could brainstorm a little bit of what would be like hooks. What are ways of like kind of put like a provocative question that we could ask people for either departmental organizing or ULP? I mean, I don't know if just like, what do you think of the wildcat strike is like too boring. But Jane, I'm curious, since you've been doing a lot of this work, if there's anything that's worked, or if there are things you've said that have really turned people off at the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah, I've been doing like some variation of like, have you heard about the unfair labor practice charges that our union has filed against the university? Or which people are like, what? No. Sometimes. Or like something a bit more general, like, have you heard about yeah, or I want to talk to you about some of the changes in the statewide union. Do you have a minute to talk about that? Which is not as effective, I've realized. Yeah, I think it would be good to brainstorm this more though, because I'm not sure if our rap really does hook in the way that we're talking about here.
So the ULP pledge voting is closed?
Not the ULP. There was also an election for like statewide leadership positions for our union that closes tonight. But the ULP strike pledge is like open indefinitely. We're hoping to have like as many people sign up as possible by this Sunday, which is why we've been phone banking for the last 2 weeks.
It's like a card
although
check.
we're not. It's like a sorry.
It's like
what?
a card check. They continuously, as soon as it passes the plurality or whatever, they'll call a ULP strike.
Yeah, I mean the idea, we are under some time pressure because Berkeley's semester is going to end fairly soon. And after we've collected, like ideally we'll collect like 5,000 pledges. We have about 3,000 right now. And once that happens, then the union will be satisfied that when they call a strike authorization vote, they'll actually have votes come out for that. And then once the strike authorization vote passes, with 2/3 of voting members voting in favor of a ULP strike, then the actual ULP strike will be called.
Cool, thanks. Awesome. Oh, go ahead. Oh, great.
What if I don't know how provocative to be with people, because these phone calls, you might be calling people who are like, don't want anything to do with any strike. But part of me wonders if you're like, hey, would you go on strike if it was legal and you were protected? Like, do you want to go on strike? Do you want to go on a legal strike? Like, I don't know if there's some way of making it like sound fun and sexy. I mean, striking is in its way fun and sexy.
If you're not busy later, we could all go striking.
Yeah, I think the other thing that people have been doing, our union is also bargaining over changes in our workplace conditions related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So some people have been leading the conversation that way, like saying like, hey, there's a lot going on right now. Like, are you doing okay with like suddenly working from home? Talking about that. And then like once you've established some rapport, being like, and are you ready to go on strike? Which I don't know how effective that's been. I haven't tried that because I really feel like I want to, the ULP strike is the thing I want them to know about if I only am going to talk to them for like 30 seconds. But yeah.
Cool. We'll do breakout groups at the end and we can talk more about this. Here are some just general tips for when you're on the call. One resource I found said that you should pick one approach between the unexpected, the emotional, and the simple, and stick to that, and that's kind of related to hooks. But another piece of advice that I found very useful, even though I initially thought it was just misogynistic garbage, was if you smile during the call, you're much more likely to remember to be enthusiastic, and that comes across really strongly. We all get robocalls every day from overworked, service workers, domestically and abroad, who are trying to sell us things. And enthusiasm goes a long way to convincing people that you're not a robot and that this is worth their time. Identify with the person and make sure that it's clear that you're not paid. Like, I'm a fellow grad student volunteer, that like, we're the same, and my job isn't to bother you at home. I'm doing this on my own time because I believe that it will make a better world possible. People have a habit of asking if they have a minute. This is a really bad habit for phone banking because people are used to, your guard is up when you get a call from a stranger, and people are looking for any opportunity to end the call. If they don't have a minute, they will tell you. If you ask them if they have a minute, you're going to have 95% of your calls or more are going to end at that moment. Be grateful, but don't apologize. Thank you for your time is a much better phrase than sorry to bother you. However, the film was just fantastic. You should definitely check it out. The Sorry to Bother You film. I talked a little about the 70-30 rule. It's very difficult to abide by this rule, but your goal in any organizing conversation is to listen as much as possible. It will make what you say much more powerful if you know how to craft it to the individual, and it will make the person much more likely to join you either as a signatory or as a fellow volunteer. In the phone banking world, there's kind of 4 categories of phone banking. There are probably more, but these are pretty useful general categories. There's supporter identification calls, where you're just calling people and asking them a simple question like, hey, do you support the wildcat strike? Hey, are you thinking about voting for Bernie Sanders? Hey, like if the election were today, whatever. And those calls can be very short, and those are mostly data collection calls. And I don't think this type of call is actually very useful for our campaign because the electorate is so small. I think the other types of calls are a lot more useful, such as persuasion, where you call people, you ask them questions, and then you try to persuade them to join a cause. Often voter ID call or supporter ID calls would then be used in conjunction with persuasion calls, where people would then be put into baskets, and more advanced phone bankers would either persuade them or get out the vote. The third type is, where you call people who are known supporters and you try to get them to come out and actually vote. These calls are weird because one would think that somebody who is pledged to vote is going to vote. This is super far from the truth. Somebody saying they're going to vote, I think even in that case, only has about a 60% chance of voting, I think even in a primary election. And I think the numbers will probably be worse for something like a union election because there's a lot less mediatization and like social pressure to do it. So the get out the vote calls, usually your first question is confirming that they're on your side. It's not that you're trying to suppress votes that aren't on your side. It's just that you don't want to waste 10 minutes of your time making a plan with somebody who's going to vote for the opposition. Making a plan with them, and this can be very, as a phone maker, it often feels like it's patronizing and condescending, but it often goes like this, like, okay, the polling place opens at 6 a.m. and closes at 8 p.m. It looks like you live 4 miles from the polling place. Do you know where Marshall High School is? Oh, okay, so are you going to drive there or walk there? What time do you have to be at work on Tuesday? Oh, well, yeah, if you like to vote in the morning and you have to be at work at 8, what time do you have to wake up on Tuesday in order to make it to the polling place on time? Oh, okay, great. Do you live with anybody? Do you think you could bring them with you to the polling place? Obviously, I don't imagine that there's a polling place for the ULP pledge vote. People can probably just do it online in 30 seconds. But walking them through it, or even getting them to do it while you're on the phone with them, can be huge because somebody saying that they're going to vote and somebody who has voted are just, they're worlds apart. And like, it's amazing how often you'll call somebody who's like on election day and find out that they in fact haven't voted yet, and it's like 5 p.m. and you have to send a car to pick them up. And the last type is the most important and the hardest. It's volunteer recruitment. As you can see by our little diagram of blue people, if we grow our numbers, these other 3 types of calls can be way, way, way more effective. And in fact, I think that in this case, every call should probably end, every call with a supporter should end with volunteer recruitment, where you're trying to convince them to join you in phone banking, or at least to join you in calling a few friends and making sure they know what's going on and how it stands to benefit them. Thank them for the support. Tell them how you thought you would hate it when you started doing phone banking. One trick people use is ask them if a particular time they'd be available for. Like, hey, would you be available to help us phone bank for an hour this Thursday? And it kind of confuses the question, because if you ask somebody if they would like to join you as a phone banker, they're probably going to say no. But if you ask them about a specific time, they might check their calendar, and then they're visualizing themselves doing it. Like they've moved it from like the theoretical realm into like the, oh, this is something I'm considering realm. Also, like just saying that it's an hour, like when usually it's more like 2 or 3, but they can stop anytime, can also help a lot. Another thing that's important is to follow up personally. Like text them, be like, hey, it's Roberto. It was great to talk to you last Thursday about this. Make sure they know who you are, that you're not a robot, and that you're somebody they actually spoke to, and that you're the same person. I'm looking forward to joining you this Thursday for phone banking. And this is really, I find this really difficult logistically, because some days, I'd make like 100 calls and I'd have like 30 people to follow up with, and I'd have trouble remembering what we talked about. And what I used the, in your contacts, there's a notes field, and I'd add them to the contacts in the notes and be like, we spoke on this date, we spoke about this, their brother's in the hospital, they, they care about Medicare for all, they're interested, they're available to do phone banking and text banking on these dates. They live in Reseda, and so on. Because I just can't keep it straight. In regards to volunteers and managing them and managing yourself and making sure that, that people who are interested in phone banking continue to come back and have a positive, meaningful, and effective experience. Their research has shown that their well-designed tasks for volunteers, activists, and organizers have 5 characteristics. One is that the task uses a variety of skills, that it doesn't feel so monotonous. That the task has a strong identity, that you're not having people just cut, full sheets into quarter sheets. You're having them do something that has a meaningful and holistic vibe. That the task has a significance, and that significance is obvious and palpable to the volunteer, and that the person is granted some degree of autonomy. Like, for example, you can give somebody a script and make sure you tell them that it's a starting point and that you find that the hook is successful. But if you have people reading off the script, you have 3 problems. One is that the person on the other end of the line can tell they're reading off of the script. There's a very different tone people who aren't actors use when they're reading a script. 2 is that it's not going to be responsive to the content. It's going to result in these non sequiturs that make for less meaningful interactions. And 3 is going to burn out the volunteer. It's important that we think of ourselves that self-care is like foremost in the way we volunteer, because we're not going to be able to convince other people if we're doing this out of some sense of moral imperative or guilt or obligation. We need to be doing this because it's meaningful, or else we won't be able to do it for as long. And 5 is that there's a feedback channel, that volunteers can give feedback to organizers, and organizers can give feedback to volunteers. It's super important to normalize in, if you're doing a group phone bank, like, hey, or if you're doing a practice, like, wow, that went really well. I loved what you said about this. In the future, I would consider not using words like that. Instead, consider framing it as a positive. Or I totally agree with everything you said, but I was surprised to learn that 30% of Americans don't know what a primary is. So you should be sure to include the primary, when we decide which Democrat goes against Donald Trump, is coming up on Tuesday. Or instead of saying ULP, say unfair labor practices pledge. Instead of saying COLA, say cost of living adjustment. Maybe define what it is. Because while those of us who are in the humanities or who are involved in activism are very firmly aware of all these demands, there were 16 some odd thousand people were calling, and a lot of them have differing understandings of the situation. Yeah, Melanie. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, I wonder if there's a way to also still have phone banking parties in the time of Zoom, like a way that people could be on Zoom together, phone banking, and then like have a check-in. Because I think part of that well-organized task is that people are able to like connect with other people. So that's just something to think about. And we could also put that, like we've had COLA office hours on Strike U. We could also have like ULP phone bank office hours, and just everybody hops on Zoom. And
yeah, the statewide has organized like you call in for like a 4-hour kind of, or you can jump in and out. But yeah, there's a period where everyone's on Zoom. And then like meets themselves and maybe turns their camera off and goes and does calls, and then yeah, you can discuss what's going on in the chat box and ask questions. I think one way to make it a little bit more fun might be to do it on like a campus level or a department level where people have like established relationships and like actually feel like comfortable like sharing what was funny in their call or what was not funny in their call or whatever. But yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna talk. Those are great ideas. We have a slide about that in a couple. But yeah, it's really important that because you're going to have some calls that are bummers, like where people agree with everything that you say and refuse to sign the pledge or refuse to join the union, and those can be incredibly deflating. And it's important that in the phone bank parties, there's often these bells you ring when you have good conversations, and then everybody cheers, and that kind of it kind of flattens the roller coaster of and makes everybody feel good when like it's possible you go to a phone banking event and you get really unlucky and you only have bad calls, but knowing that other people are having good calls gives you hope that phone banking isn't a dire, hopeless, and meaningless task. And it's far from that, but sometimes you get unlucky. So skill variety is like not doing the same thing over and over again, like shaking things up a bit, making sure that people know what the goal is, for example, knowing how many more votes we need before we win, instead of just like confusedly calling spreadsheet numbers until you get to the end. People should know why they're doing it. Yeah, I don't think I need to read the rest of this because reading slides is bad practice. Let's all do a stretch break. I was on a sunrise call. If you're able or willing, feel free to stand up, and we can reach down to the land, that we are grateful to. Acknowledging that all of us are on land that was stolen. And reach back to the activists who came before us, making this kind of work possible. And reach forward to a future where we all are paid enough to live and where healthcare is a universal human right. And reach up with something clever too. Up also to the sky, which is pretty cool. It's got birds and stuff. Yeah. All right, thank you. Thanks for that. Then I found another quote that I thought was really useful. When you find live wires, people who are interested and stoked, put them to work immediately. Find something they can do, any little thing, and get them started and ready to do more, or you'll lose them. When you're recruiting volunteers, it's really important that you give people responsibilities right away and that you follow up with them quickly and meaningfully and personally, or they're likely to not stick around. Your goal is to get the person to take action for their self-interest. Everyone stands to benefit from the sorts of things we're fighting for. This is about how to keep people engaged past, in the time of Zoom. Phone bank parties often have a wall thermometer with their goal of how many calls or how many conversions. This is something that we could still do. We could have it up on the website. We could have it linked to Google Sheet. This is just a bar graph with a circle on the bottom. It's not very advanced Excel magic. Another thing that the Bernie campaign does, because that's a distributed dialer, it's always been a distributed dialer, they very rarely have phone bank parties, is they have sometimes tens of thousands of volunteers in the Slack channel, and they paste bell emojis every time they have a good conversation. And then people click the react buttons, and it's bedlam in there. It's just like emojis, emojis, emojis. And when I first saw it, I was just like, who would do this? This is stupid. These people are idiots. Why would they ever post these emojis? And then soon I was just like, hey, I got a good one. And people were like, good job. I'm in Montana. Go Buckaroonies. And I'm like, yeah, weird, strange guy from the other side of the world with whom I share no lived experiences. It is good. Reward yourself for good conversations. If you have a bell in your home, ring it. You'll get some endorphins flowing, Pavlovian style. Movements grow one person at a time, and that goes for volunteers and for people who they're calling. It's easy for people to think of themselves as the fighter for something, who are trying to get people to do something, but really we're trying to grow our movement. I think that's a much better productive framework. Here's a tweet I thought was great. I'm just going to quote it. Knowing somebody is unpersuadable is a gift. It means you can focus your efforts on the persuadable majority. Let's keep working. It's easy to get into the weeds with Trump supporters on the campaign trail. It's a complete waste of time. If there aren't visible dents in their worldview armor, just end the call. You can just be like, hey, I got 100 more calls to make. My boss is breathing down my neck. I gotta go. Big socialism's got a quota over my head. It's much, keeping calls shorter. Obviously, if you're having a call that you're enjoying, make it as long as you want. This is a time for human connection. But if you're having a call that just feels tedious, where someone's making bad faith arguments and is gaslighting you, just point to an imaginary boss and say you got to go. So the two major phone bank campaigns that I'm aware of right now within the grad student organizing are phone banking to get people to join the Wildcat strike, and phone banking to get people to either to pledge to strike for the unfair labor practices, or if they're not ready to join the union, such that they can sign that pledge. Great, I'm getting nods. That's good. Another quick tip is to make people feel smart. Like what I said earlier, about always including the definition of what a primary is when canvassing people to vote in them. The primary, when we vote for which Democrat's going to go against Trump, is on Tuesday, is much better than just saying, will you vote in the primary? Because if somebody didn't know what it is, suddenly they feel stupid and they have to pretend to, which is a very psychologically difficult thing and is going to cause them to be more likely to end the call. The phrase, as you know, is kind of a bad faith phrase, because if they knew, you wouldn't say it. But it's a useful framework for including information without sounding too teacherly. After you get them to answer the first question or so, you should probably start by telling your story. Here's a stock photo, and I came to UC whatever to make the world better. Without cola, these are my struggles. This is why this is meaningful to me. You can tell your friends. Ideally, it's your story, but if you find the story of your friend or your colleague more compelling, obviously it's super important the stories are true. And Melanie tells me that campus is actually collecting cola testimonials because of how powerful storytelling is in growing movements. Jane was telling me that a common concern was they don't think their vote will make a difference, or that they're not comfortable putting their name on something. But I think it's important to remind people that when only 5,000 votes are needed, a vote is a very, very loud thing. These types of votes are often called by just a handful of people. when the electorate is this small. Yes, Melanie, hold on, I have to mute. Great.
Jane, maybe you could clarify, when people say they're worried about putting their name on something, is that an anxiety that a pledge to strike
could then be seen by the administration? And is there any reassurance that folks can do that those pledges are not accessible to administration?
Yeah, I've been explaining, a couple of things, like that the pledge only goes to the union. It's like the union's information gathering. It's not going to be shared with administration or like with their, advisor or anything like that. And that we have no interest in doing that. And then also I've been just trying to explain that like the pledge is really like a show of strength and like unity among graduate student workers. It's not even the strike authorization vote yet. It doesn't ideally, like, I guess on the call, we'll get them to be down for the whole idea of a ULP strike. But it's really like a sign of the way I've been explaining it is it's like our first sort of show that we're like standing or whatever, we're acting strongly together. And the hope is that like even with the sort of credible strike threat that the ULP pledges present, we'll get the university to actually bargain in good faith with us. So it's not, so the two things I've been trying to sort of emphasize to people are that, like we won't share their information. And we don't exactly know where this is going to go yet. And this is the first time that we're sort of trying to assess our strength. And it's really important, for us to show that through the pledges.
Cool, thanks. I'll add those to the slides. What other concerns? How can we preempt those concerns? Like when we talk about the ULP as something that's non-binding, that it only goes to the union, that's not a strike itself, and doesn't convey anything to the university. So to make university retaliation impossible, is something to consider. That when we ask people the question, like when within our question about whether they'll sign the pledge, when we're defining that pledge, how we can cleverly preempt some of those concerns. That might be too big a question to answer live, but it's just something that is a good goal.
Yeah, I think the other thing is really slowly explaining like what an unfair labor practice strike is, because most people have never heard of that. I hadn't heard of that until this year. And that it's because there's so much confusion about what kind of strike we're talking about now because of the wildcat strikes that have been going on for 6 months, making really clear that this is a sanctioned, like union-backed and like legally protected strike, so people won't be subject to discipline like firing or suspension or anything like that. So that this is actually a very different kind of strike that we're agitating around now. And I've been trying to emphasize that that's in part we're pivoting towards a sanctioned strike because of COVID-19, like because people are much more precarious, because that's something that people raise. Like they're like, how can you be asking me to strike in a global pandemic? This is really insensitive. Like I can't risk my job right now. And I've been trying to be like, yeah, exactly. That's why we're going to do a protected strike this time, so that there's no way you can lose your job. But also like the COVID-19 pandemic makes the COLA much more important than it ever was. Like your housing conditions are now your working conditions, and like we deserve for those to be safe and affordable and whatever.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, like I was surprised. I was talking to one of my coworkers at a tech company about strikes, and it was super clear he just didn't know what a strike was, like at all. Like he was like, no, I can't go on strike. I have to go to work today. It was a climate strike. And I was like, no, it's a strike. He's like, no, I got work. And I'm like, first of all, you work for yourself, and second of all, it's a strike. I mean, you don't go to work. And he's like, no, I can't go to your protest. I'm like, no, it's a strike. And he just hadn't heard of it. Like there was no labor education in our school system, especially for people in STEM. So logistically, there are a couple options here. Pen and paper is a pretty bad option. The bare minimum is going to be a shared spreadsheet with phone numbers. That's to say, if you're phone banking in an organized fashion. If you're just phone banking your friends, just like a private spreadsheet or a piece of paper would be fine. But one of the things we're going to be talking about a little bit is there are call systems like ThruTalk, which is fantastic, and CallHub, which is decent. which allow you to automatically divert different volunteers to different numbers. And some of them actually dial the numbers for you and only connect you if the person picks up. And what that does is, since most people don't pick up numbers from strange caller IDs, that can like triple or quadruple how many calls you can make in an hour. The downside is that you have to pay for those calls. You can also use these services just to show you a number on the screen that you can call from your cell phone. That's much cheaper and a little bit more logistically simple. But then you still you deal with having to ring to voicemail, then hang up, then text the person manually. But I think an automated system, especially for a cross-campus campaign, would definitely be worth investigating. Using Google Voice or FaceTime will make things a lot faster if you're not already using something like ThruTalk or CallHub, because you'll be able to copy and paste phone numbers and make calls from your computer. Also, in the case of Google Voice, it allows you to use a number that's not yours, which if you're worried about, potentially being harassed, it's nice to have a disposable phone number. Henry Ford was a horrible person and anti-Semite, but assembly lines make things a lot faster. The every second counts, and if you have an iPhone, you can make calls to any phone using FaceTime on your computer, and otherwise just Google Voice or something allows you to make calls from a computer. Having a Zoom room or a Discord chat or a Signal where everybody in a phone bank action can ask questions, stay motivated, post emojis, can be really huge. Like, it's not exactly a pizza party full of models laughing and having a great time, but it's the best thing we could do during COVID-19. God, that looks like fun. I miss places. I think we can skip breakout rooms because we're already a breakout room. But yeah, Jane, do you want to phone bank me?
Sure. So I'll be the caller?
Yeah.
Okay. Should I do my...
Oh, wait, who says hello first? Oh, the person being called says hello first, right?
Yeah.
It's hard when there's not doing it. Hello?
Hey, Rob. It's Jane from the COLA campaign. I'm a graduate student at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm wondering if you've heard about the ULP strike pledge that our union has emailed out.
I mean, I've heard of the strike. It's all over. It's weird and scary.
Yeah, for sure. And this is also like a really chaotic time in the world for everyone. The ULP strike pledge that I'm talking about is a little bit different than the strikes that have been going on the past 6 months, which have had some really big consequences for people. The ULP strike pledge is actually a union-backed, sanctioned, legally protected strike that our union and other organizers across the state are trying to rally people around right now. Do you know what a ULP is?
No, I don't.
Okay, yeah. So our union has actually filed a couple of ULPs, or unfair labor practice charges, against the university for things like the mass firing of more than 80 graduate students at UC Santa Cruz, but also for doing something called direct dealing. So the university has given different raises to different groups of graduate students across the state without ever bargaining or negotiating with our union around that, which is a big problem and a violation of the laws as laid out by the Public Employee Relations Board. So once a union files an unfair labor practice charge, the union can actually call for a sanctioned and protected strike to force the university to sit down and bargain with the union in good faith. So that's why we're calling around and asking people to consider signing the ULP strike pledge. It's a very short survey. I can do it with you on the phone if you like. It's just to get a good sense of our numbers and to be able to show the university, like, hey, we have thousands of grad students across the state who need you to take our demands around cost of living issues seriously.
Cool. Wow. Yeah. I was worried with the other strike, the wild cat strike. I don't want to threaten my visa status by breaking any laws, but I think that a legal and sanction strike would make a big difference. But I'm confused about. I know that we're in a union. I think it's like the auto workers for some reason. But am I in the union or am I represented by the union?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so our union is called the United Automobile Workers Local 2865. So even though we're not auto workers, we're part of a big international union that affords us certain like protections and benefits. And all academic student employees, so teaching assistants, readers, tutors, graduate student instructors in the UC system are represented by our union. There's So everyone's represented, and the union cares about all academic student employees and works to protect our rights and to win like raises and other benefits through contract negotiation. But not everyone is necessarily a full member. To become a full member, you do have to kind of opt in. There's a form on the union's website that I can walk you through. And you do pay a small initiation fee, and a small percentage of your monthly wages go towards union dues. It's 1.44%. So for myself personally, I hardly notice it coming off of my paycheck. And I often think of it as like an investment in the union. So if I pay a small amount of my paycheck every month, if the union is strong and works well, I win that back when we win a raise in our next round of contract bargaining.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like a small price to pay for more money in the end. Great. So yeah, I'd be happy to join and sign. You know, I think that the Wildcat Strikes made a lot of great points. You know, sometimes I didn't agree with their tone, but in general, I think I'm on board.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I think cost of living issues are something that really affect all of us in different ways. Like I know for myself, living in Santa Cruz, I've had to move like 5 times in the last 3 years. And I think this is something that happens to other UC students on other campuses as well. And I think if we if we get organized together, it's something that we can actually get the university to finally address.
Cool. Great.
Okay.
Tick, tick, tick. I'm signing the pledge. Tap, 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 type, 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 tip, 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 tip. Wow, I'm part of something bigger than myself.
Amazing. Thank you.
That was great. Were you
Cool.
using one of the scripts or rap sheets?
No.
Cool. So these are going to be shared with folks, but there's FAQ
Yeah.
and also a rap sheet for calls. That can give people who are new to phone making the resources to be as well-informed and responsive as Jane was on that simulated phone making experience. Yes, Melanie?
Do we want to simulate, I thought that was great and really helpful. Do we also want to simulate a phone banking call that's about organizing departments? So it's not specifically about getting people to sign the ULP pledge, but it's like taking someone's temperature on their willingness to go on Wildcat Strike in their department. I think that conversation might look a little different. I don't necessarily feel super equipped, but maybe Rob, I don't know if you want to give it a try being the caller.
Okay.
Or not.
I mean, I'm not a grad student, but I'll do my best. Should I call Jane or Melanie?
You can call me if you want. Or does our other person who's calling in want to participate in I can't remember what your name is, person on the phone.
Was it Bora? Did I hear that correctly? Are you still with us?
I'll mute myself.
Hello? Our phone friend, are you still there?
We can unmute them.
Oh, wait, yes, sorry. Go on, I had you on mute.
Oh, yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah,
Yeah, that situation actually relates more to me because I'm interested, like I'm part of a small graduate group, and I wanted to just call some people in my group and see if they would, like, if they're aware of it or would be willing to join a sanctioned strike. So yeah, I'd be happy to.
Great. Can you share what campus you're from and what department you're from? If that's
I'm from UC Davis and part of the International Agricultural Development Program.
okay. Awesome.
So am I part of the call as in like a caller or callee?
Actually, Jane, would you want to take this? Just because I don't have experience as for
Yeah.
this issue. Do you want to be the caller or a callee?
What would you prefer, Bora? I can try calling you and convincing you to do some department level organizing, or you can call me if you want to give it a shot.
Yeah, I think I would like to try. Let's practice being the caller. I just had a question.
Mm-hmm.
For the ULP, is that mainly from the union's ULP charge against the university? Is it that they bypassed the union in terms of like trying to bargain or their wages or the conditions of the strike?
Yeah.
Is that the major ULP?
Yeah, there's two. So the union filed one about the mass firings at UC Santa Cruz, and another charge to do with direct dealing. So that was like the big thing was like Napolitano, the UC Office of the President, actually tried to discuss, like just meet and confer about cost of living issues with like it's like a graduate student body that's not the union. It has like some GSA representatives in it from other parts of the state. I can't remember what their name is. It's a really long acronym, but it's not like they cannot do that. They have to bargain with our union over changes in the conditions of our employment, including changes in our wages. So that's the other big thing. And the idea with the ULP strike or the ULP charges is that like the Public Employee Relations Board has actually issued complaints. So it's taking the union's charges seriously and saying to the university, hey, you have to resolve this. And likely later in the spring or early summer, there will be a hearing. And prior to the hearing, when the Public Employee Relations Board would actually, just totally mediate and tell the university and the union what they have to do to resolve this, there'll be an opportunity for a pre-hearing settlement meeting when the union and the university can sit down and like kind of bargain. So hopefully we'll have a really strong strike threat or have already gone on strike at that point, so that the university understands that like the union has teeth and they need to resolve the charges in a way that's favorable for us. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then I think for the mass firings at UC Santa Cruz, is that an unfair labor practice?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm trying to understand it. Like, why would it be an unfair labor practice if they were not completing their duties in terms of like university seeing like they didn't get the grades?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, yeah, we definitely did here at Santa Cruz. We definitely did violate our contract. Although the university hasn't conducted like a thorough and even sufficient investigation for all of the like 80 people who they fired, let alone the like more than 100 people who they issued letters of warnings for. And this has become very clear in the like grievance meetings that we've had, and in the sort of disciplinary process, that like they don't actually I was the union representative in a lot of grievance meetings, and they don't even often know who the name of the person is who they're talking to, or like what department they were in, let alone can they produce like the university actually has the burden of proof when issuing discipline. This is like something that we fought for in our contract for like 20 years, that the university has to meet just cause obligations when disciplining us as workers. And they have not provided sufficient evidence to be disciplining workers the way they are. And quite often we can show that even though people were engaged in a wildcat strike, they followed their description of duties. They followed all the directives of the instructor of record, who's their direct supervisor. So that's a big part of why it's an unfair labor practice charge. Mass firings often, even if employees have violated the contract in some way, often go to something like the National Labor Review Board or the Public Employee Relations Board. it's an exceptional circumstance that an employer would fire, like at UC Santa Cruz, like 1/10 of their workforce at once.
So usually there's like the due process of filing like a charge against workers not completing their duties is like going through a board to bring it like to look investigate those charges even more.
Yeah, so the Public Employee Relations Board is the arm of the National Labor Review Board that was established like in the early 20th century, basically to protect workers who are getting organized in unions. And when an employer and an employee or the employee's union can't resolve a dispute themselves, they can take recourse to the Public Employee Relations Board or the National Labor Review Board if they're not a public institution, and ask for like arbitration and mediation through that board. Kind of like taking it to court, but like labor court.
Okay.
Yeah, so because like our union and strikers at Santa Cruz multiple times asked the university like, hey, can you sit down and talk with us about cost of living? Can you sit down and talk with us about the letters of warning that you've issued? And the university has always refused to meet with us in any capacity. The only next step for our union to take is to file charges with the Public Employee Relations Board. And the university has also filed charges against the union through the Public Employee Relations Board at this point.
Oh, through the board. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for answering my questions. I think that would have come out, or like those are some questions I had myself.
Yeah. No, you're welcome. I know it's confusing, this stuff.
Okay. I think I'm down to try and just still. I feel like I'd still be processing or like thinking about ways to say things. But yeah, can I test call with someone?
Yeah, I'll be I'll answer the call. Are you ready?
Okay. Sure. I'll just okay. Hello? Hi, Jess. I'll say. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Who is this?
This is Bora from the from IID grad group, and I just wanted to ask, are you aware that the union filed an unfair labor practice charge against the UC? Have you heard about the Wildcat strike in the past quarter?
I've heard about the Wildcat strikes at Santa Cruz, and someone asked me if I would withhold my grades, but I don't want to do that because it doesn't sound very safe.
Yeah, that's totally true. I mean, at Santa Cruz, they were having a Wildcat strike. But then there are certain events that have gone forward since then, and so the unions actually filed a charge against the UC for the mass firings at Santa Cruz, and now we're trying, the union and at UC Davis as well and other campuses are organizing for a sanction strike. So I wanted to ask if you would be at all interested in striking if it was legal, if there was protection involved.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it changes it if there's protection, like that means that I wouldn't get fired like the people at Santa Cruz?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the union would be backing this strike, and the university would not be able to fire or withhold wages from the grad students.
Cool. Well, that sounds a lot better. Yeah. What do I need to do?
Yeah, I think this is where I need to there's a website that I can lead you to. There's a strike pledge that's going around, and if you would sign that, it's not like confirming that you confirm, or how do you say it? Like it's not promising that you will be striking, but we're gauging. We're trying to get a majority of people who would be willing to strike so that we can be more effective in presenting our case against or our case before the university.
Okay, cool. So
it's just a strike pledge, right? Yeah. So you can sign a strike pledge, and then I'll send you the link. But would you also be interested in, would you have an hour or so, hour to help with like calling other people in our grad group or phone banking for the union at all?
Yeah, you're looking for people to call other like
Yeah. If you're, I know we've talked about this the strike before, but if you would want to call with me, like to reach out to the rest of our grad group, that would be really cool.
Okay, yeah, like do you want to set up a time to do that together over Zoom or something? We can call other people in our grad group.
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
Okay, so now I just need to fill out the survey and we'll call other people in our grad group together.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks.
I'll email you the blah blah blah. Okay.
Awesome. How'd that feel?
It was helpful. Yeah, I think just giving me the chance to practice and actually visualize myself doing it was really cool.
Glad to hear it. Yeah, I think that doing practice sessions with people is really fun. It's super fun to pretend to be like, I don't know, like to pretend to be someone who doesn't believe in voting or to pretend to be somebody who didn't know they're in a union. We don't get to act so much as adults. But also it's super helpful because it also it helps both people because the person who's pretending to be the called person gets to project and empathize with the concerns of our membership, and the person doing the calls gets real practice without the secondary voice of being like shit, oh god, what if I lose this person, because you know they're already your friend.
Yeah.
Feedback for each other.
Sorry?
Do you have feedback for Jane, and does Jane have feedback for you of how the call maybe could have gone better?
Not feedback from me. I was wondering if there was anything that I said that, or like I need to look into the strike pledge. Is it a strike pledge, or is it a survey that I'm passing or telling people to sign?
Great. I'll send you the link to the pledge right now. Yeah, if you haven't signed it yet, it'd be awesome if you would. And if you would actually share it with your grad group, that'd be really cool.
Great.
The one thing that is like, I'm not always sure whether or not to talk about this with people on a call, but if we did go on a ULP strike, the one real risk for people is that the university can not pay you for the days that you are on strike. So I think at one point you said like pay couldn't be docked. Like it could. It would only be docked for like the days that the university could show that we were not at work because we were striking. And that's actually like kind of hard for them to do in some ways because we do all kinds of like as TAs, we do like weird hours where we email our students and stuff. So I'm not sure that it would necessarily happen, but we just don't want to like mislead people into
I see.
Doing more safety than there is. I haven't been raising it in my calls that much because we're still actually a few steps away from even like being on the edge of going on strike, and I think maybe we'll do more sort of phone banking or political education if we actually are going to launch into a strike or do the strike authorization vote. But yeah.
So right now we're passing around the strike authorization, or not. We're not doing a strike authorization, but we're just test gauging people's, like if we have a majority or not, right?
We're doing, yeah. So the union wants people to pledge before it. I think the union's thinking is that if we did a vote and the vote failed miserably, that would look really bad. Like the university would probably know that we did that, and the university would be like, wow, like we're never going to believe them when they say they're going on strike ever again, and we're never going to give them anything because they have no power. So the university the union, kind of to protect itself, wants to get people to pledge so that they know that when they proceed to a strike authorization vote, there's already, an awareness of what the ULP strike is, and people are already buy-in. And it's also because if they meet with the university through the because of the ULP charges sooner, they like without actually having gotten to the point where we're doing the strike authorization vote, they can say, hey, look, we had 5,000 people pledging like right off the bat to strike, so you better take us seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we're not at the it's pledge and then strike authorization vote and then strike.
Okay, I just signed on. Ouch. Oh, okay, gosh. Hi. I just wanted to see your guys' faces, I guess.
Hi, nice to see you.
Who am I talking with?
I'm Melanie.
Okay, Melanie.
I'm Rob.
Rob. Jane. Okay. I had another question, I think, in terms of, let me see if I can remember. So there is protection in terms of we wouldn't be losing our jobs if we were doing the actual strike, but during the days that we're not like working, like that we're on strike and withholding our labor, that is when like that's how much the university could cut back from our wages. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in theory. Although we're not sure they would.
Because it's hard to.
Depends on how long the strike goes for, and like if it's only a 3-day strike, it's going to be a little bit hard for them to prove that you didn't. Also, because the way that TAs are paid, right? You get paid for a certain number of hours over the entire quarter, and there's an assumption that you might work different hours in different weeks depending on like how much grading you have to do or something. So I think, yeah, if our strike went on for a month, which I think is really unlikely, but if it did, then yeah, they could conceivably dock a paycheck. But that's when, and this is the other nice thing about a sanctioned strike, that's when the union's strike fund kicks in, and they can actually give strike pay to workers who are missing paychecks. So yeah, that's another nice. There's all kinds of. I think the protections that are afforded by a union sanctioned strike are so huge that the potential consequences are really, really minor.
Okay.
Do you think also the UC would be unlikely to dock pay because of the PR?
Yeah, I think so. They didn't dock pay of anyone at Santa Cruz ever, even though we had a full picket line for a month and we were on an unsanctioned strike. I mean, they did fire people in the end, but then they've actually been giving us tons of concessions. They just gave all of the fired people's spring healthcare back because it looked so bad. And that was actually when our union stepped in and helped to negotiate that. So now that the union's getting involved, like we really do, I think we are, if we can get enough people to pledge, I think we're in a very, very strong position for bargaining with them over cost of living issues.
I wanted to just circle back a little bit to the phone banking script and the little demos that we did, which I thought were really great. And I just thought, I had a feeling we kind of dived right into the meat of it, or I don't know what the vegetarian version of that is, but the heart of it. And so I also wanted to just remind, because there might be some folks watching this recording from home, that like in the original phone wrap, it's also like there's a check-in about like, how are you doing with like these crazy times, and like how are you and your family, are you safe, how is it to be teaching over Zoom, or like doing grad school stuff over Zooms or online. So that can kind of be like part of our hook leading in. And the wrap also shows like, it's sort of like a little, it's laid out linearly, but you can kind of also mentally have it as like a tree. Like, okay, if they're not a member, we do this. If they are a member, then we do this. If they're not supportive, like, then I say this, So I think for me, it's been helpful.
So at this point, my computer crashed as the host. We talked a little bit more about scripts, which is linked in the bio and in the description on the Strike University site. And we made our plan about how each of us is going to contribute to growing this movement with phone banking. The assignment was using a piece of paper to write 5 people you're going to call to join the effort. Ideally, 5 people to call to recruit to being phone bankers themselves. Get out the volunteer call. And for you as a participant in this demonstration, to host a phone bank of your own. If you have any questions, get in touch with Strike University. And thanks so much for coming to this workshop.